Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Talking Point. My name is Sean Michael Small, and of course, today is Wednesday. So, with me, of course, is my usual co-host, Mr. Keaton Shah, as well as the good lady herself, Mrs. Karen Shashera. Good morning, Keaton and Karen.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen. Good morning to everybody. Welcome to Talking Point. And hello, Karen. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much. I'm always happy to be with you two guys. I think you do a fantastic job, and that's the feedback I do get on the occasions that I'm out, and they do mention both of you, and I think you're doing a really great job. And good morning to your viewers, as usual, of course.
Well, Karen, of course, you also do a good job, particularly when it comes to explaining the legal ramifications of certain things, even if it's not necessarily something, an area of expertise that you've covered. You will do the research and dig deep. And with regards to the commissioner inquiry now, I guess, I'm not sure, we don't necessarily have the conclusions or the report or the recommendations just yet.
The report is, according to the chairman, King's Counsel, Jerome Lynch. He's promised a report by April, so we look forward to that actually. He says it's going to be based solely off of facts, and we'll remove all emotive language from it. So April is when we will have an idea of the Commission of Inquiry's findings.
Right, but of course, with the closing statements and the arguments, there are certain things that we won't necessarily look to have a final conclusion, an opinion on what we believe to be the complete determination of the case. But there are certain things that we could observe that we deem reasonable. And Karen, there is one area that you did observe with regards to pariah's liability, because that is one of the things that's basically being questioned or trying to be determined, and you believe there's an area where pariah would still potentially be held liable, and there's an area where potentially they also will not be held liable and will not have to have responsibility for. So I believe that is vicarious liability and duty of care. So if you could just explain to the public those things and why vicarious liability won't apply and why duty of care very much might apply.
Okay, just want to say one thing. It's good that I think that will be the quickest turnaround, as I understand it, of Commission Inquiry report. But as you know, that goes to the President, and then to the President, to the Prime Minister. Because he has prepared it and presented it to the new President, that doesn't mean that we will see sight of it. I'm sorry if I have to say that, but the Shell Financial Commission Inquiry, which was completed eons ago, and which in 2016, our current Prime Minister has said that he'd seen it. My God, what happened?
No, Karen, you're okay.
He had seen the report and it showed clear instance of criminal misconduct. He was so appalled by it. And he says he wants it to be to act quickly. That's about 7 years ago. So what difference does it make when you do a commission inquiry, when you keep it under covers and you don't relate? So let us make a distinction between his report presented to the President and then the Prime Minister releasing the report to the public, or using the excuse he used 8 years ago or 7 years ago that he had to keep it out quickly, but it would prejudice any prosecution. Oh yes, very true, very true. So put that in mind. So to answer your question, coming more to your question, commissions of inquiry are a creature of the British system, and really it has been used, not in this case, I'm happy to say, as a criminal, as a sort of a political jousting, in the sense that when there's a change in government, the new government, which may be now the opposition, is now in the seat. They use the opportunity now to say, oh, you didn't let us know all of this. We're going to let the public know everything because it's open to the public. Yes, it has a lot of the rules that govern normal court or any tribunal. That is true. But its focus is more on fact-finding, and it certainly has no power to prosecute or indict or to charge or to institute proceedings. What the intention is that, look, we've done the hard work. We allow people to speak honestly and openly without the restrictions that would apply to evidence in a court of law, so that now, based on that information, we know where we can go from there. So I'm pleased to say in this case, this commission of inquiry was not political in that sense, as it normally is, not only in Trinidad, all over the world, and England is known for that. That's the first point. The second point I have to make is perhaps the cynic in me says the reason why they did do it was because of the outcry from the general public in the way in which the families of 4 divers who died were treated by Paria, who was the hirer of LCMS, who was the independent contractor, who was contracted to carry out the repairs to the pipelines on Berth 5 and 6. I don't know the technical language very well, but people were outraged at the way in which they were treated and put them under a shed, no communication. And the media did a good job of highlighting almost the insensitivity, the callousness of Paria. And I think that may have been an incentive, but it's to their credit. And on that point, in fairness, again, I always try to be fair in what I do say, is that perhaps one of the reasons that Paria took that position, which is unfortunate, is because the lawyers, I'm not saying it happened, I'm just saying that the lawyers might say to them, you stay quiet, because if you come out and say anything as if you are, too much, it will look as though you are accepting liability. And so therefore you have to keep a distance. Sometimes lawyers give you that advice. So it may not be very well that maybe the employees of Paria wanted to adopt that attitude, but maybe the legal advisors may have given them that advice. So I just wanted to put those things out for the public to understand the background to all of this. Now, to answer your question, really this comes down at the end of the day to money. Yes, it does come down to use of fancy word compensation, because only one of the 5 divers survived, Mr. Boudram. The other 4 perished in the pipeline, a 30-inch pipeline. And the issue now is for the family, as you read in the papers, they're saying, who is going to take care of us? Who's helping us? It's obviously compensation, which is reasonable, that is the position they would take. So the question then arises, who is going to be liable to them? Is it going to be LCMS, the independent contractor who was the employee of the divers? Or is it going to be Paria, who is a government agency, is not a man of straw, as they say in the law, more than capable of meeting the financial obligations that may come out of a compensation claim, but they are independent. They are not the employees of the divers. So what you probably wanted to say from a legal point of view, does Paria, the ones who already have the means to compensate the 4 divers and their family, on what basis are they going to be liable in the law? Not in the court of public opinion. Talk about in the court of law, and the law court I'm talking about is the civil court, not the criminal court, which I hardly think anyone is going to go after the criminal side of it. I don't think there's much good to be gotten out of that. But from the civil side, you're talking about damages or compensation. But in order to be able to claim unsuccessfully, I have just gone through it myself in my own case, in order to be able to claim it successfully, you have to be able to fix Paria with a legal duty of care. Now, this is where I just wanted to make it clear. The basis for Paria, they're not really worried with LCMS because LCMS probably has no money. So even if they took LCMS to court, that is the family of the divers, even if they were, at the end of the day, LCMS must be maybe bankrupt. They may declare insolvent.
LMCS.
What's it? LMCS.
Yeah.
Right. They may declare their bankruptcy, and they probably may be bankrupt. They may be not be able to pay the legal cost, much less compensation. So there's really Paria who they want to be liable.
Right.
Okay? And in doing that, they've got to find a legal basis upon which they will be, the court will say, the courts of law now, if you go to court, no longer the commission of inquiry, because the inquiry was fact-finding.
Yeah.
Fact-finding. If you want to pursue it, you're going to the courts of law and you're going to civil court. So there are 2 bases upon which they might want to look at: vicarious liability and non-delegable duty. I think I'm on I feel like I'm giving a lecture, and sometimes I feel that
no, actually, Karen, it's
because I feel like I'm in my lecture theatre in law school giving a lecture.
I think the reason why Sean and I have remained a bit silent during this is because we ourselves are not too familiar with vicarious liability. Yes, so we're not too familiar with that, and that's why we're listening, because you know, as much as
and it is for the benefit of your viewers, for them to understand what is at play. Once this matter goes to court, unless Paria does the right thing and settles with the families, which might be the better thing, but sometimes settlement means that you're not going to get what you would have gotten in a court. The stronger your case, the more likely you succeed, the more you'll get compensation. And it's the conduct. When they're doing compensation, they look at the conduct. How did Paria behave? I mean, it was terrible, their response. So all of those things.
But I think there's three. I think there are 3 points in particular which you made, which I think is absolutely crucial for you know, everybody out there to understand. First of all, a commission of inquiry, at least this one, was non-political in nature. It was only fact-finding. I mean, after the 1967 commission of inquiry into gas station licenses, Gene Miles, that entire situation there. Since then, there's this opinion, this thought that it could lead to political persecution. But this one in particular, I can't say or see that there was any political interference, at least not as yet up until this point. Secondly, liability in the court of the public opinion versus the court of the law. And I think that's where we got a little caught up last week, because we tend to debate, we tend to analyze, and sometimes we get very emotional, which you can't help. But this is why I was arguing last week that we're not aware of the laws, and I'm glad that you're explaining it this morning, because public opinion may actually differ to what the laws suggest. And the third point that you made, which is very, very important, is that the divers will not want to go after LMCS for any sort of compensation. They will focus more on Paria, simply because Paria has the resources when compared to LMCS. I'm certain that most Trinbagonians never even heard of LMCS prior to this tragedy happening. So those are 3 very crucial points.
Well, Keaton, at the start of this, though, I'm not a lawyer either, but I did suspect, Karen, that Paria would have some amount of responsibility and a duty of care because of the authority that they had over the situation. And the fact that it was their premises, they were the one that hired LMCS, they set the terms and conditions. They had some part to play. Now the question is, because I'm not a lawyer, I suspect they had a part. I have no idea exactly how big of a part. So with regard to their liability, if you could just explain the 2 concepts. Oh, well, yes, hold on. We might have to hold off on that because we have to take a break soon. So I'm wondering, could we take the break now?
I just want to clarify one thing, and I will explain it all.
Of course.
When I say it was not, a commission of inquiry are known to be politically motivated in the sense of party against party. So when I said it was not politically motivated, it is in the very narrow sense of, oh, you in government, now we sitting in the seat, we're going to expose all the things that you hid and let the country see for itself. Okay, so that is, and so it was not politically motivated in that narrow sense in which it is used. But I will say there was political motivation from the point of view, the government saw the outcry of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So from that point of view, in that broader, less rigid sense, there was a political motivation. Look, we better do something here because we're looking so bad. We're looking so bad that the only way to sort of try to address or to ameliorate this is let's have a commission of inquiry into this matter. And I think that itself is in a cynical way, I give the government credit for doing that. And clearly, the appointment of that chair, Casey, he is not a figure. He's not there just doing their bidding. It is very clear he's independent. And that, again, is to the government's credit. You must give credit where
credit is due.
Yes.
And you absolutely
I actually wanted to say that if you didn't say it, that the choice of King's Counsel Jerome Lynch, I think, was, I mean, I didn't know the gentleman in any significant way, but I have to say, at least in my opinion, I am satisfied with how he handled the situation. At least from the point of view, it's obvious he's not favoring Paria. One might say maybe he himself might be a little too emotionally invested, But for the most part, I didn't see anything egregious with regards to any sort of bias against any party.
Well, I'm actually thoroughly satisfied as well. I'm fully satisfied with how he's handled the situation, even when both sides got very emotional with respect to Paria and their stuff, at times getting emotional. Of course, the families would get very emotional, but he stood firm, he stood very strong, and he did precisely what you would hope the chairman of the Commission of Inquiry would have done. So, yes, credit where credit is due, certainly. We have to take a break, but bear in mind, as Karen said, in the narrow public pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, we will return to Talking Point after this.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. only on WESN Content Capital.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
The government is afraid to say it. I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy. There will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. only on your content capital, WESN.
Welcome back to Talking Point this morning. Now, if this show did not enlighten you or educate you prior to this particular episode, well, you're certainly going to get a dose of education this morning. Sean and I are very much appreciative of this conversation and the explanations put forward by Karen Nurse Teixeira. Karen, as we promised before the break, and now which I'm looking forward to, just to inform us as to vicarious liability and non-delegable liability.
Right, and that's the important thing, because if this were to go to court, and in fact, I think Mr. Mirage, if you go on the website, there is his summing up, and that is very helpful too, and I read it myself. So what it is that you're looking at, if it goes to court and not settled, the issue is they want to make Paria liable. How can they make Paria liable? In the law, not in the court of public opinion, in the law. And the legal and law recognizes two potential areas in which it could be held liable for the death of those four, and also the injury and the trauma, etc., to Mr. Boudram, who survived, because he also is a victim. And it would either be on the concept of vicarious liability or on a non-delegable duty. Now, the reason I mentioned the vicarious liability, without going into too much legalese, it is a public policy decision, which the English court, and we on CCJ is not a final court of appeal. The Privy Council, what they call the Supreme Court, is still a final court of appeal. So they tend to still want to quote their judgments, as although they are not binding, they are very persuasive, almost binding. So what is the vicarious liability? That is where a person is an employer-employee situation. The employee is carrying out one of his duties under his contract with his employer, so he has a contractual relationship, and in carrying it out, he does it in a very negligent way, and causing damage or injury to someone. that will be your claimant, person will make the claim. Who that claimant will make that claim against? Yes, you can make it against the driver because he's the person who actually caused the accident, but he more likely is going to want to include the employer. Why? It says so. That's the public policy thing. The employer has deep pockets. The employer probably has insurance, which he would have taken out in part of his employment circumstance. The person who, the actual employee of his, was carrying out something for the benefit of the employer's business, something that was beneficial to the business activity of the employer, and therefore, under public policy grounds, it would be unfair. And I'll give an example. Suppose you own a business and your business is to deliver goods to one of the supermarkets. So you have drivers working for you. One of your drivers is delivering to one of the supermarkets. He goes through a red light. No question, he was wrong. And in doing that, a little child or an adult gets knocked down. And that knockdown, either severe injury, death, or whatever. Now, who is that? Who are they going to sue? Yes, they could sue the driver, but the driver is a man of straw. A straw, he doesn't have any, you're not going to get anywhere with that. You may be not be able even to recover legal costs.
Yes,
so you go after the lawyer. An employer will be liable if the accident occurred in the course of employment. And that clearly would be a good example. Now, that kind of liability has generally been limited to where you have an employer-employee relationship. Pariah is not the employee in the law of those divers.
Yes.
That's why companies now outsource and get independent contractors. Why? For a number of reasons, one of which is those persons now become the employees of the independent contractor. So he is the one who is vicariously liable or liable for, or it's not only vicariously liable, but in his case, the same, making sure that there's a safe system of work and so on. But if they were to go after the independent contractor in this case, I don't know what they will get out of it. So they will want to go after pariah.
Yeah.
Now, I just said pariah is not the employee, and vicarious liability applies in employee-employee situations. However, very quickly, I'm not going to spend much time on it, there has been a growing number of cases where the courts in England, at the highest courts, have started to make county councils in England who have outsourced certain activities to independent contractors. Accidents occur, usually involving a child, usually involving sexual abuse, those kinds of cases in which the county council has been held liable. County council is not, it outsourced it.
Yes.
But they're suing the county council, even though the county council is not the employee of the person who carried out the duties, but which they outsourced. So there's an increasing number of cases that were going down that line.
So Karen, it might be that you're suggesting, based off of those cases, the county council will equate to pariah, in the sense of what we're seeing now in the cases in London, not necessarily the laws. Yes. So just to give that, yeah.
Yes. So you would think now, oh my God, you mean pariah could be vicariously liable for the death of those four, even though they were not his employees and those were independent contractors, because case law was starting to head in that direction. We won't go into it. But a decision in 2020 involving Barclays, where this doctor, who was an independent contractor at Barclays, he was not the employee, he did work for them, did work for other people, and so on. But you know what he was doing? His job was to do this medical examination for all employees, current and future, for their suitability, medical suitability to be working in Barclays. And what happened was, at the end of the day, they found out he was sexually abusing a lot of these young girls. He dared the families of these girls wanting, or the girls themselves, now they're adults, wanting to sue Barclays. And Lady Hale, who's very respected, said, listen, let's put an end to this vicarious liability nonsense. Dr. Bates was an independent contractor. He was not an employee of Barclays. It's very clear from the facts. And we are going down a rabbit hole with this vicarious liability, and so I'm going to put a stop to it. If we go down that road, you're going to find, in the cases, the county council are going to become bankrupt. The children are not going to be protected because the county council will be afraid to do anything, because next thing they're going to be sued. So at the end of the day, the 2020 decision coming out from the Supreme Court is saying put an end to using vicarious liability in cases where you have an independent contractor. So the bottom line to what I have just said to you is that although it seemed as though Paria could have been vicariously liable to the employees of the independent contractor because of these cases that were developing in 2020, the courts, the Supreme Court in England put an end to that. So push that aside now. Okay, because then, so now we're looking at non-delegable duty of care.
Yes.
Now, similarly with non-delegable duty of care, that also usually only applies to employer and employee. Those drivers were not the employees in law of Paria. They were the employees of the independent contractor. And the non-delegable duty says, you as the employer of your employees have a duty to take care for the safe system of work, etc., and not only to take care, but to ensure it is done. So on the face of it, it would seem that Paria is not liable at all, because it seems to only apply where you're dealing with an employer-employee situation, and those drivers are not the employees of Paria. However, there are exceptions. And one very critical exception, which does apply to Paria, and which will make Paria liable, in my respectful opinion, is where the Paria in this case, the work that has been undertaken by the independent contractor is inherently hazardous and high risk. When it is inherently hazardous and high risk, which this definitely was, going into a 30-inch pipe under sea to clean it, which required not only commercial divers, but specialized divers. The contract between Paria and the independent contractor has to be so detailed to ensure that Paria monitors the work of the independent contractors, divers, ensures that there's a rescue plan in place, takes into account the exact incident, which I never knew the meaning of it. I had to go and look it up, the Delta P thing with Delta P incident. All of those things should have been in the contract. All of those things should be in the contract. When, according to the evidence, there was no provision for Delta P incident, there was no provision for what was going to happen if an emergency happened. And with regard to monitoring by Paria, the evidence seemed to show that whoever was assigned the responsibility to monitor was not doing a good job, because I think what caused the sucking in of the 4 divers was they opened up a valve.
Yes.
And the difference in the pressure, high and low pressure, the high pressure sucked them into the valve.
Which Karen, we should also, you know, we're being absolutely fair here, which according to Christopher Boutram was not on the duty form or their work form. That particular valve, they were not supposed to do that. But what the argument he was making is that in order to get the job of which we were contracted to do, in order to get that done, we had to actually remove that valve.
Well, also remember,
right, but I'm not
I know.
focusing on this.
I know, but there was an approved document that did have that step on it, that Paria did approve. So remember that is also part of the testimony of
the issue is that in the contract, there was a duty in the contract for Paria to monitor the work of the divers. And from what I understand, my little reading, to undo that valve, it would have taken about 30 minutes, because you had to unscrew about 20 screws and so on. And it is clear that whoever was assigned by Paria to do that, was either on a lunch break, was done wrong. That's what the evidence showed. So they failed to monitor. Secondly, the work out of the job, whatever they call it, there was nobody working in Paria who could assess that contract and see whether it was viable, whether it was reasonable, whether it was safe. And they did not employ a specialist person to review it. They failed in that duty. So bottom line is this. Generally speaking, we know with the vicarious liability, throw it out the window. It's not going to work. Lady Hale said, we're not going down that route. Now, with non-delegable duty, it usually is limited to the employees of the employer. However, they are employees of Paria, and that is where the job involved is extremely hazardous, very high risk, and there's no question it was. And when you look at the contract, there was no provision for Delta P incident. there was no emergency response put into the contract.
Yeah.
Both were wrong. The independent contractor is wrong too, you know, but he has no money, so they could go after Paria, right? I'm not absolving the independent contractor, you know. I'm saying Paria wants to not be liable, and they want to say, those are not our employees. Those are the employees of the independent contractor. But the law recognizes that even where persons are not your employees, you still owe that duty, that non-delegable duty of care to those divers who are not your employees, where the work involved is extremely hazardous and extremely risky. And when you look at the contract, at least what I've read, clearly the contract itself did not contemplate a Delta P incident, which is what exactly happened. The person who reviewed the contract did not have the expertise to do it. So it was as good as they didn't review the contract. They did not bring in a specialist to do that. And when the contract provided for monitoring the work, because they could monitor from on top, the persons who were assigned to monitor what was being done, the evidence showed that they either won a lunch break, they do it around, and when they say that it took about 30 minutes to undo that valve because you had 20 screws, so in that 30-minute period, where was the monitoring by Paria? So all I am saying is, at the end of the day, to all that I have said to you, from a legal point of view, I do not see, and Mr. Murat's senior counsel, as much as said that, he didn't go into all what I went into, but as much as said that, the Paria is under a non-delegable duty of care to the divers, although they are not the employees, because of the nature of the job and because of the failings for them to carry out their part of the contract with the independent contractor. So both of them are liable. But as in law, I will do it from my own experience. As in law, what you always will do, that is why you have these concepts developing. Why? Because the actual tortfeasor, the actual person who is responsible, this is your independent contractor. He's a small player. I don't think he's a big business, a big businessman. You are looking for compensation. That's what the families are saying, rightfully so. So who are they going to want to make liable? They want to make Paria liable. And I am saying, based on my explanation of the law, vicarious liability is out the question because there's no extension to independent contractors. Non-delegable duty of care, which usually only applies to employee, does extend, in this case, to the employees of an independent contractor where the work is hazardous, it's inherently hazardous or risky. And there's no question that was the case, and the contract did not provide for it, and all of what I have just said. So yes, they have a good case, so Paria most likely will either try to settle, and they better settle a good amount because that will be another uproar, or put the family, which will be terrible on their part, to put the family through having to go and get lawyers, when you have the resources of the state at your disposal, to get Queen's Counsel, I've gone through this myself, and to carry them through for the next 10, my one was 17 years, put them through hell with years and years of delay, and then they can't pay legal costs and so on. So in the best interest of everybody, and to shut down this terrible part of our history, is for Paria to do the right thing and make a settlement with all the families. And furthermore, it's like in every situation where something goes wrong and you have to pay and go in your pocket, people learn. You see, when they have to pay, they improve their system. That ain't going to happen again. They will never let that happen again because they're not prepared to do it again.
Well,
so it's a good thing.
I think the key to point out the situation of the families. They might not be able to afford to keep up the fight, and they might be bled ultimately dry. Meanwhile, there is the fact that, at least in the case of, I think, of some of the families, the breadwinner was the father, the husband, who is deceased. So there is questions with regards to how does that family even financially survive just in general. And the compensation is not just, punishments, to alleviate suffering. There's also just the practical need of, well, our family's earner is gone and we have no alternative.
I think also it's, in the case of Christopher Budram, he's indicated that since this tragedy occurred, he has not been able to work because of his injury sustained. He's still going through physiotherapy, which in itself is actually costing him money, and not being able to work for you know, just about a year now, just under a year, and having to pay for these bills is not very easy at all, given the current climate.
What about him having post-traumatic syndrome?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
I would say this. I would say in conclusion on that matter, from a legal point of view, PARIA is liable under non-delegable duty because inherent risk in the thing and all the things that we know that went wrong in their defaulting in terms of their contractual obligations. And so they will be responsible to the divers, as would the independent contractor. But I would think that the government would do well to bring an end to this sordid and heartbreaking thing, because it is not a case where a matter is heard in a very clinical setting of a court. It's a matter where every single citizen was able to tune in and see the tears, the heartbreak. And for the government to extend that, they would be ill-advised to do that. So right now, they're probably in negotiations, having reached the end of the, waiting for the report from the from the chairman, I mean, the formal report from the chairman, to finally, in the meantime, start negotiating or with their lawyers and so on without coming out and taking liability. I think that's what they're going to do. That's what anybody would advise them to do. And I think they will learn a lesson. This will not happen again. That's how people learn lessons. When they have to pay, when they pay.
No.
When they have to pay, they learn a lesson.
Now, there's a flip side to it, of which I will mention after this break here on Talking Points. We'll be right back.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Points as we continue the conversation this morning following Karen's explanation. And Karen, once more, thank you very much for that. We're very much more informed now as to vicarious liability and non-delegable duty and how it applies in this particular instance. And education is actually very important, and that's why we understand why it is vicarious liability. Thanks to Brenda Hayes, Baroness Hayes of Richmond, and her suggestion. You know, let's just put this out. This does not apply according to the law. So appreciate that explanation. But when you mentioned before we took that break that, you know, in the interest of all parties involved, the best option would be to set this out of court, because for many reasons, you know, your case took 17 years, for example. This family, it's been less than a year, just under a year. You don't want this to go on for an extended period for many reasons, for financial, for psychological, and even in this case of Christopher Boudram, who physically is still trying to recover, as well as what could happen in terms of Paria going to court, and if they are found to be liable according to the court ruling, how much they may have to pay as considered an out-of-court settlement. The flip side of it, of which I was mentioning, is that there is a possibility that Paria, which is a government entity, we're being absolutely clear and honest, whether or not they might receive instructions or whether or not on the advice of their attorneys, they may actually want to go to court. And the reason why is because not paying that money now, even if they have to pay a lot more later down the line, let's say it takes 15 plus years, as is normal here in Trinidad and Tobago, as is normal, then if Paria is found liable, the government of the day will have to pay. And so this government in particular might not want that to happen, where they have to pay now or settle out of court. They might want to go to court extended by so many years because it looks bad on their part. It's just a simple little thing of public relations that this administration will not be there then. It might be the same political party, but certainly a different administration, or even perhaps a different leader.
Karen, I'll let you respond, but I'll just say this. I don't think that is ethical public relations if that's done. Mm-hmm. And technically speaking, if you study public relations, one of the things is with regards to ethical communication. But Karen, as a former politician, I mean, you have the main point to make here, and I'll follow up after.
I think the main point I'll make is distinction. I understand what Keaton is saying. The difference with this case and say my case or a number of other cases, this has been played out in the public court. People have been able to follow the evidence. They've seen on the papers, you pay papers, you see somebody crying. This is very emotional. This is very heartrending. It's so that the government already has in its last comment saying money can never compensate for the great loss and so on, because they start trying to put a humane face on it. So I don't think, I understand what you're saying, but Jean Miles is a good example for quite a while of how she was treated, you know, and I don't think, the government would be best advised to start negotiations and have a non-disclosure provision, because you do not want, as with all settlements, you don't want them now coming up, oh, okay, we settled with this, now we're going to take to court for something else. No, you're not going down that route. No, you're going to settle, you're going to make a statement, and we hope that all of us have learned from this, and whilst we know that this will not bring back the lives of things, we do understand the thing, and they think, and you know what, at the end of the day, they'll win 100, whatever marks they think, whatever financial thing that they think they're going to benefit in a court of public opinion, and that's what politicians operate in, they would have won in spades. And by the way, they can drag it out, because even if the High Court says Paria is liable, they take them to the appeal court. And then they look what's going on with the airport thing. How long is that going on? Please. Then not that they will do it, I'm not saying they're going to do that. And then they take from the appeal court, then they say, they lose at the appeal court, they go to the Privy Council, and they drag it out. So I just don't think that the government, from a political point of view, from the optics of it, they have done well to have a commission of inquiry. They have done well to put in a person as chair who's obviously independent. They have done well to allow us to see the good and the bad and the indifferent of their own behavior. They've done well so far. They have made up a lot in their initial response by doing what they're doing now. And for them to take all of that and throw it away would not be advisable. Settle, when you settle, you could have a settlement, which means that you're not admitting liability, you know, but give them the money, close the thing, and say to the public, this has been a learning experience for all of us, and to say all the right things, and people will respect them, and they might get a lot more votes just out of that.
I wanna agree with that. I think one of the things with settlements, we see it all the time internationally. The case was settled out of court, and the details of the settlement is not really disclosed. So you don't know how much money or what the terms and conditions are, except the fact that obviously there's some sort of NDA where the parties cannot speak about it.
And everybody's satisfied.
Right, and what that does is it softens the blow considerably, because now we're left to assume, was it a big payout, was it a small payout? Because a small payout implies, well, the liability was not, but we don't know. No, but the point is, we don't know. It covers, because if it's a large payout that implies, ooh, this was really, really bad in the eyes of the courts of law, it covers that, it hides that. Now, I want to say this with regards to the courts of public opinion. I don't know if other people in the country will share this opinion, but to me, I always thought, no matter how bad things got with regards to the upkeep of our various infrastructures or industries or what have you, no matter how much your bad talk, the laziness of the Trinbagonian worker or government workers, or the callousness or the laziness or the lackadaisicalness, at the end of the day, Trinis, Tobagonians, we're not going to allow a disaster to happen. Carl has a safety record for a reason, right? Yes, they could have delays and they could do, bad customer service, but they're not going to risk anything to cause a serious disaster. And to some extent, maybe I was naive, because it's not as though we haven't had accidents in the past, but along comes this. And to me, this is one of the worst because of how potentially preventable it was. And I think... And
how it was in public domain. You see, people saw the pain. This is different from normal.
Our survivor who could give accounts.
Very critical. Hold on. Disasters happen all over the world. But not only Trinidad, it's how you handle it.
And the thing is, to me, I also understand what you're saying, Keaton, and I agree that it potentially can be done. But I think in this case, it's the situation of playing checkers instead of playing chess, because the situation, when handled effectively, it is difficult for anybody to run away or evade responsibility. And yes, some of the politicians might be retired by then, but the party responsible, right, if there's an effective opposition, would not be able to get away from something like this. And I don't think we're going to forget this situation for a long time.
I mean, some of the politicians are retired now, but still in the position of minister. But anyway, a couple of things. Yes, you said that the public opinion, it matters very much, and the public outcry, because that's who witness it. But we're speaking from the Commission of Inquiry point of view. We're also speaking from when the accident happened, from the time it happened, and the media. There was a media presence. Everybody was informed and keeping up to date. We also did not mention, we forgot, which is extremely important as well to this case. When the bodies of the deceased were recovered from the pipeline and taken to the Forensic Science Center, the morgue, they actually, a video was leaked online and circulating on social media of the men and the bodies, which also had a major role to play in this entire case and public opinion. So that's very important. Karen, what I wanted to ask you is that, let us say that the case is taken to court. Let us say the families of the divers and the deceased divers, as well as of Mr. Christopher Woodram, take Paria to court and thrown?
Absolutely. At any stage, I mean, the way under the new civil rules are not new anymore, but the whole idea behind the civil rules, as opposed to the old rules, is to work towards the mediation, settlement, not clogging up the court with matters. You know, the best way is don't let us have to be the arbiter. You'll work it out, and rather than have to have the court. So yes, so many matters are settled at the doors of the court to see how far they can take you with it. And on that same point, you talked about the bodies of the divers being exposed. And they also, when it initially came out, they were put under some kind of shed and not given him. That's called exemplary damages. It's additional damages that the court can award for the conduct. They just show its displeasure. So apart from the damages or compensation that you're entitled to, they go can give you now exemplary damages. Say, we are displeased. We want to record our displeasure in the way in which the defendants, which will be Paria, conducted themselves, particularly in the early days of this matter, that created such pain and hardship to a family who lost their family in a manner that no one would want to think their child died. So at the end of the day, I come to the same conclusion. It would be best place to settle. If it's settled, it means both of us agree. And if you're going to settle, the families of those divers will retain lawyers to represent. They're not going to go in there to settle with the government lawyers. They're going to retain their lawyers to represent them with a settlement agreement so that they get the best, and then close that chapter, apologize, move on, lesson learned. And the country and the government will get kudos for doing the right thing rather than doing what is the easier political thing, which is to fight them. This is not about somebody losing a house. It's not about losing a house or losing money. This is people's children. These are people's parents. You can't, and look at the way, this is not a normal way of someone that. Can you imagine you stuck in a hole? You can't even see anything, even the torchlight. You put it on the torchlight just for comfort. Can you imagine that? You go in a testimony in a court of law. Listen, the government probably is going to settle, but they're going to wait for the KC, the chairman's report. And I hope that they will publish it for the public to see, which they did not do in my case with CL Financial 8 years later. But that was political, for sure. So they would do that, I hope, and that they would by that time have been in negotiations with the families, the lawyers of the families, to come to a settlement and an agreement. And that happens all over the world. We're not going. We have train wrecks that happen. You look, Amtrak, wasn't that big?
I actually agree with you, Karen. I think the government should settle. However, I will be a bit surprised if they give out if they release the report, because of the fact that there are political appointees involved, and if it's not necessarily going to change the outcome, they could still potentially settle, but still not release the report because they want to try to keep this thing as minimal as possible. But I will just say this though, with all that we said today, we're not saying that LMCS is innocent. And I think this case, the implications, and I think why we especially want to see the report is the wider implications with regards to how, especially for dangerous jobs like this, contracts are awarded and bids are put together and accepted, both from the hirer as well as the independent contractor side, because there's been failures, and it seems to be, I have heard rumors that this is somewhat of a norm because, well, it's a cost-cutting measure, but unfortunately when you cut corners to cut costs, accidents can happen, and in this case, one of the worst possible outcomes.
And by the way, with a commission of inquiry report, it always ends with recommendations. So it's not that you just think. So there will be recommendations.
Yes.
So even if the report is not released, which it should, I'm quite confident those recommendations, just from a cost-effective thing, just from not wanting this to ever happen again, that what the recommendations will be taken into account.
Well, Karen, we have to pause there for now. We have to break for news on the hour, but upon our return, well, we'll open up the phone lines this morning where you can express your thoughts and opinions. And if you do have any questions, well, we're here to take them. Hopefully we can answer them. And we'll be right back after this.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. 12 succumbed to COVID over last week. 2 dead, 1 held, 3 guns seized following sting operation in Barataria. Christine Kangaloo resigns as Senate President. And internationally, children among dead in Kyiv helicopter crash near nursery. Now for the details. 12 persons have succumbed to the COVID-19 virus over the last week. This took the total death toll to 4,309. 519 new cases were also recorded. The rolling 7-day average for deaths are 2, and for new positive cases, 74. There are currently 71 patients hospitalized with the virus. 2 men were fatally shot, 1 held, and 3 firearms recovered by police officers following a sting operation into a spate of Facebook robberies in the Barataria district. According to police reports, on Tuesday, during the period 12:30 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., police officers attached to the Northeastern Division responded to a Facebook ad in which a vehicle was being offered for sale. Acting on information, police officers proceeded to 11th Street, Barataria, where 2 suspects who were allegedly armed with firearms approached an unmarked police vehicle and pointed the firearms at the plainclothes police officers. Other police officers who were in another unmarked police vehicle parked nearby announced their presence, and the men allegedly pointed the firearms in the direction of the officers. The officers fired at the alleged perpetrators, hitting 2 men. Both suspects were conveyed to the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex in Mount Hope, where they were pronounced dead on arrival. Their identities remain unknown at this time. Christine Kangaloo has resigned as Senate President. In a release last evening, the Office of the Prime Minister stated that Kangaloo tendered her resignation from the post. The Senate will meet today, where the new President of the Senate will be elected. In international news now, at least 18 people, including 3 children, are known to have died after a helicopter carrying top officials crashed near a kindergarten in Ukraine. Ukraine's Interior Minister Denis Monastersky, the Deputy Interior Minister, and a State Secretary are among those killed. They were on their way to the front line, an official from Ukraine's presidential office said. 9 people were on board the helicopter, which came down in Brovary, east of Kyiv. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Living in victory every day. Inspire. Motivate, encourage, hope. It's about topical issues. It's about everything that you would want to know about hope, about life. At the end, you're going to say, yes, if he can do it, I can do it too. If she can, I can do it too. No matter what they say, living in victory every day.
Nicole Lawson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN. Thank you very much to Denise Martin for news on the hour. And, well, as you know, folks, the conversation continued between Karen and ourselves during the news on the break segment. We don't want to get too much into that right now.
Not at all.
But I'll tell you what we would do. Let's open up the phone lines where we give you, the viewer, the opportunity to comment on this morning's proceedings. And if there's a topic of which we did not comment on and you'd like to raise, that is not an issue at all. If there are any questions, feel free to pose them. We'll try our best to answer them. Of course, Karen is with us today. We only ask that you be mindful at the time because we only have one phone line that is currently operational, and we would like to give everybody equal opportunity to contribute, as well as my co-host always says, don't calling at the 11th hour.
Yep. And also don't forget to mute your phone when you are on air. Some people forget to do that, and then it to correct the situation uses up a lot of time. So please be mindful of that, as well as the fact to try not to give your thesis on a situation, some quick points so that we could get more contributions and more perspective from different callers. And if my question says it again, you're not limited to what we spoke about today. I know we spoke about the Commission of Inquiry. People have opinions on that. If you have a difference of opinion, call, and we have no issue with that. But be prepared to be able to, defend your position and give us reasoning why you have that stance. But there are other things going on in the country. I do know that one thing, I'm looking forward to speaking to the ASP later next week, is that there was a sting operation, some Facebook bandits. It ended up with the robbers being shot.
Shot and killed, and one actually being injured currently on the police guard. Yes, certainly look forward to commenting. I have some thoughts, because I think we have the video as well.
And of course, the price of food is an ongoing situation. So if you want to call in and talk about that, that is fine.
To raise something that has nothing to do with the news. This is a bit of light commentary.
Sure.
You see, Trini jargon is something I absolutely love. It's wonderful. But it's not something that I totally always understand. For example, Karen was using a terminology, butter can't melt in their mouth. And, you know, at one point I actually just had to Google it just to make sure.
Yeah, I don't understand what that is either. I don't understand what that is either.
According to the definition of that phrase, if you were not aware, it means somebody who comes across or is perceived to be, it means somebody who comes across as perceived to be rather innocent or rather kind and sweet, but actually somebody...
Oh, so they think butter can't melt in their mouth.
But somebody who is actually rather unkind and, well, let's leave it right there for now, shall we? We have a caller on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I looked at the RIC's public consultation yesterday.
Yes.
And I just want to tell the public, if you hear people keep talking, but they seem not to want to appear, because what I saw in terms of the audience, it was not what I expected. I mean, granted, I think the RIC needs to, because I had to go on their website to see where they were having the consultation. So they have one, they have two for this month, they have one in Okoya, and now they're having one in Arima on Thursday, which I think people need. If you have an issue with the RIC's rate increase at TNTech, then they need to go out, and that is the problem of the public participation. You have to, if you have an issue, then go out and let the issue be, express yourself, and let whatever your opinion is be told to the RIC directly.
Yes.
People need to appear, and I was so disappointed with when I saw some of the lineup of the speakers there. Jack Warner, Brian Bigg, Robert Amar, these prominent people. The average citizen need to be accurate with what's happening. If you have an issue, go out and see.
Well,
Thank you.
Caller, if I may on that point, again, it's a good point from the sense that the platform has been made available. Everything in Trinidad and Tobago has become consultation, but in all fairness to the Regulated Industries Commission, the platform has been made available. And rather than go on social media and complain, I hear you, and I think that people should make the effort. I think people think it's just too much of an effort and it's not worth it because the decisions have already been made. So
that's part of it, but the other question is enough being done to inform the public of when and where these things are taking place? Yes, it is being done because members of the public do know, but is enough being done? And I don't have an answer to that question. I'm just putting that out there because I do feel that to some extent, you know, we don't do a good job spreading information in general unless it's about a FET in this country.
I think I could answer your question in one sense. Even if enough was being done, you know, let's just say for argument's sake, enough was being done. I don't think the public listens too much.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't think that the public is too receptive.
The other thing with TNTech is governments owe them money. So to some extent, maybe that should be the angle, but they can't. Can they? I don't know if they could.
Public wouldn't make that argument, would you? We have a call until the Commission of Inquiry report comes out, because the Commission of Inquiry's report, and the Commission of Inquiry is essentially a fact-finding mission. So for us here to say that this is the individual that pulled the plug, or this is the entity that pulled the plug, it would be very much wrong of us to do so, at least right now.
But Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the legal theory that you offered up today, who actually pulled the plug and not waiting on Paria to be there? I'm pretty sure, first of all, that they probably got instructions to go with the job anyway, even though the supervisor was not there, because, you know, time is money with these sort of things. But your legal theory doesn't care who pulled the plug. the whole point is the situation was not set up properly, regardless. Good day.
I hope you don't mind if I go back to yesterday.
Sure.
But you mentioned in the public service.
Yeah.
And I have explained to you the reason for that. In the public service, everybody have a supervisor. And that supervisor is supposed to put up a performance appraisal report every year on it. Not only that, if the supervisor of the supervisor is unhappy with the report and he have good grounds, he could amend the report. These things are not being done in the public service. And the reason for that, I have explained to you, is the government have shackled the real public servants and have appointed people on contract and whatnot who do not have public service protection. So you should give the reason for that. And then you mention why they give out these contracts. Again, I have explained to you. You might remember some years ago when I think partly was in the opposition, they talked about short pants, Buffalo was the 10% man. Because they used to collect 10% on contracts. Now they're collecting 30% on contracts. You check out any contractor who gets a government contract and find out. Right? Because I talked to about 15 of them, and all of them say, to get a contract from government, you have to pay a bribe at 30%. Any questions, gentlemen?
My only thing is, I think part of the problem is not the contract workers, but the people who have tenure and who cannot be easily removed and who automatically are promoted because that's how the system goes. And we see that, and that's a complaint that I hear often about the TTPS, but it's not limited to the TTPS.
Well, yes, precisely. That is in most public entities and with most public servants. But
I mean, Karen, am I wrong with that assumption?
Okay, I don't think, but also very quickly, just wanted to say that part of the problem as well, Mr. Chiron, is political hirings and putting political appointees in certain places. That's a major part of it as well. Call online with us from Diego Martin. Good morning.
Hi all, thanks. Good morning. I'll be quick. Karen, I like the details, so thanks for the lecture. But just to recall you all, regarding Deepwater Horizon's tragedy, remember 2010, that commission attributed the spill to lack of government oversight. We know billions were paid, right? And ultimately, BP was liable due to negligence and cost-cutting measures, even though that concrete seal was installed by Halliburton and Transocean. So they all played a role, and even the officers were charged with manslaughter. So in this case, I'm not going to go through those sordid details because they are traumatic. But of course, I think here the ethical thing to do is to compensate these families just up for a PTSD that will accompany these wives, these mothers, and these young children indefinitely while Paria and the government go on with their normal business. Indefinitely. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much, Polo.
Karen, how much would a case in a foreign jurisdiction like America that we don't follow their laws, but the example was the same industry, will that have any merit with regards to how it's interpreted here?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
The caller gave an example of an American oil platform in the American government. We don't normally use American case law, but because it's the industry.
We don't use their case law. We use Canadian case law, Commonwealth case law. But a lot of times the laws are very similar. And certainly New York State is one where they have the British common law system, so that if you qualify, for example, here, you don't have to go to law school if you're going to practice in New York. So a lot of the same principles, if you went on Google, you'd be surprised. You have to check and say, oh, this is not UK, I'm checking, this is USA, because the systems are very similar unless they have statute law or unless they developed the law.
Sean, did you all expect compensation to be paid pre-commission of inquiry, before commission of inquiry took place or investigation took place?
I thought it was a possibility.
You thought it was a possibility?
Yeah.
I think if some of the arguments put forward by the council on behalf of Paria, I didn't get the impression that there was any intention to pay any compensation before any investigation or commission of inquiry would take place. The question is, yes, Karen?
I would just say though, subject to getting caught, it's a difficult situation as to how to handle it. I mean, if I were in government and having to deal with that, you go and pay compensation, it's an admission of liability. But it may, where the facts come out, you don't really want to go, and they did the right thing. They put up a commission of inquiry, the inquiries didn't take long, he's giving his report soon, and then the government's going to do the right thing at the end of the day.
And I agree with you.
How they handled it at the beginning. So,
I agree with you that they did the right thing and they took the right course with respect to the commission of inquiry and not paying any compensation prior, because you're right, it's something that people have not understood, and again, because of public emotion and public opinion.
The way that they did not apply vicarious liability to independent contractors, because they said you bleed the county councils dry. County councils would then not be able to sustain its work. People will be afraid to send children to care homes. So there's a lot of policy considerations when it comes to government involved in matters such as this. So no, it would have been a good thing. But how they handled it getting was not right.
So I have a question. To what extent is PARIA, with regards to their legal defense and advice and so on, are they operating independently? Or do you think that the government has an official oversight or even official giving their opinion, okay, we don't necessarily want you to do this, we don't necessarily want you to do that? Because technically, the determination to settle or not settle is supposed to come from the board?
I will not
and the CEO?
Place any doubt on the possibility that the chairman of PARIA, Mr. Newman George, will be advised all the time as to what is happening, and may also, in response, inform the minister, who may then inform the prime minister. I will not doubt that that is a possibility.
Right, yes.
As per the current legal proceedings...
It's only right. It's only right.
Yeah.
It's only right. Who's the prime minister? At the end of the day, the government, if I can make an analogy with self-financing, there was a view that the central bank governor should be the one, since they were the ones who were going to monitor and have the responsibility under the Act for emergency powers. But at the end of the day, we said, but who's paying it? You're not the paymaster.
And I think it's also very important to note that Gilbert Peterson, senior counsel, who is arguing, the lawyers representing PARIA, he's a very well-known lawyer, prominent lawyer, and I think he would be advising them as to this is that's what he's being paid for. Actually, he's advising them, you know what, this is the best course. Don't say this. You don't say this. You know, and that's what his job and duty is. And quite frankly, I don't think that whilst he is hired and he will have to listen to the client's needs and wants, I don't necessarily think, and I could be wrong, that he will be told what to do.
Well, because that's the thing. His advice, I think, might not necessarily be, Karen, your thoughts to settle. I get it. In the bigger picture, that should be the move forward for the government and even for PARIA. But potentially the legal advice, because we don't know, you know, all the details of what the evidence is and what could be proven and what could be argued. The legal advice would not have the same considerations. It'll have different considerations, and it might differ. So, as you said, as you mentioned, perhaps the officials of PARIA got advice to have some distance, and that's why the communication was bad when the emergency was happening. Do you think that in this situation now we do have to consider, well, the government might want one thing, the lawyers might want something else?
The lawyers can't want anything. The lawyers aren't taking instructions from the government. They're the clients of the government. Yeah. You instruct your client. You take your instructions from your client, and your client is PARIA, which is a state-owned government. And the fact of the matter, this is a political body. This is not a private entity, and there's so many things. So at the end of the day, the government must have the final say, because you might start up a precedent and open up a floodgate. All of these things are considerations for the government, and they should settle. It's the right. It's not just the right. Politically, I think is the best thing to do.
Karen, I'm actually very pleased that you raised that in that sense. It gives me an opportunity to just clarify what I said prior to this. Gilbert Peterson, in a sense, not taking instructions. No, yes, he has to listen to the client. You know, this is essentially what I'm saying. He has to listen to the client's needs, the client's wants. He's going to take instructions as to what to do, but not how to go about doing it or what to do. That's where he will come in as the attorney at law, and he will know. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. This is all my assumption based on.
Well, what I will say is, I don't know what you mean by how, because when they look at who's an employer and who's not an employee, as an independent contractor, one of the tests they use is the control test. Today, you can't control most people. A lot of people, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and so on. The employer probably doesn't know anything about accounting, or is not even a doctor like they all say, and say that I'm sorry, I cannot go forward with this. But in anything with my matter, none of my lawyers ever did anything without me giving them clear instructions and saying, yes, I agree, no, I do not agree. Because at the end of the day, I am the client and the government is the client. So the government has political considerations. Gilbert Peterson goes on with his practice. Hopefully the government will continue to hire him, but he's a lawyer. Yeah. He's not a politician, and he's not running a state company.
Well, my only thing is, with regards to the senior counsel, I didn't necessarily like one of the statements he made with regards. I understand, as Karen, we were talking yesterday, it was him trying to basically apologize or give empathy to say that, you know, we understand what you're going through without admitting any sort of financial liability. But to me, it came out as though...
Why would he do that, though?
Right, but when he said you can't place a price on the loss, to me it was basically... It seemed, however, to effectively be the opposite. So in this case, he is giving a messaging on the situation that I don't agree with, and that's one of the reasons why I'm like, well, to what extent are we seeing competing interests, or potentially seeing competing interests? Because he's representing Paria. I don't know if he's taking direct instructions from the line minister, or how that's even supposed to work at this point.
Instructions. He's taking instructions. He has to take instructions because he has to. And let me just say that, you know, nobody has 20/20 vision. Nobody has a thing that you can look into to see what is the right thing or the wrong thing. So, I mean, as I told you when we talked Sean yesterday, I mean, I think in a way, the government is trying to make up for what looked like callous, uncaring behavior by recognizing that you're dealing with human beings. So while they would say, look, we're not responsible, but we feel your pain. But that's their way, you know, whether it goes on with people accept it, they don't accept it. Better they say that they don't say it, because the next thing will be said, you can't win. Then they will say, look how callous they are. Even at the end, they wouldn't even admit the humanity of these people. You say it, look at them, they say it, you cannot win in politics. It's just, and this is not a normal client situation, and this has never happened before, to my understanding. And it is, and like with any great crisis, which has been played out in the public domain, because it was a commission of inquiry, there's no playbook by which you can sit down and say, this is what you can do. They do it. I am not, as you know, I don't think I'm particularly a friend of the government as they see me, but I always try to be fair. And in this case, they did the wrong thing at the beginning. Gilbert Peterson acts on instructions of his client, but he gives his clients advice because that's what he's there to do. At the end of the day, the government has to make political considerations, and they have to look at the floodgate that they may open. So there are all kinds of things that we sitting down here are not privy to.
Well, quickly, just usually in cases like this, some sort of change happens. Maybe a mid-level, maybe a high level, maybe the person at the top, the board, somebody tends to have to take internal responsibility and is disciplined. And that usually means sacking them or removing political appointees. Should we, if we don't see that, or should we see that? And if we don't see that, what does that mean?
Well, the least we could do is see some procedure or emergency response team or emergency response procedure put in place. And this is one of the things that Jerome Lynch, King's Counsel, raised during the Commission of Inquiry. He scolded Paria for not having any emergency evaluation or any procedure put in place following this action. Since then, nothing has been done. And the systems that are in place at Paria have not improved. or those that did not exist before still do not exist.
I think they said they're waiting on the results.
But the thing is that whilst I don't know what results they're waiting on. The thing is that there should be something in place from then until now, because God forbid that something like this does happen again, at least within the time that the accident happened till now, then what would Para's response be? You know, so this is what I'm saying. This is why I understand why he scolded them, and I think he was absolutely right.
But I'm not just talking about changing procedures,
Karen. I know it's about changing personnel as well. I'm saying the least that could be done.
Right, Karen, you understand where I'm coming from, right? Like, somebody's head generally tends to have to roll in a case like this.
I think some people are going to go. Yeah, I mean, this is just talking just based on what I've learned, you know. Whoever it was supposed to be monitoring, clearly he wasn't doing that. Because, my God, you must have seen he was undoing his screws. And undoing those screws would have allowed the high pressure suction to occur. So some heads are going to roll, I'm sure. And that is as it should be, to give the public some level of satisfaction too. So I think there are going to be some head ruling, but we don't want to be precipitous, and we want to wait until we get the report. And that's what the government probably already what they're going to do. But let them wait out the report, and they get in report soon.
I will just say this. I'm not advocating for this because I want to see people punished. I'm advocating for this because there was a failure, and I don't want to see the failure again. And it's the same thing like what you said, Karen. The money, they will learn. But also, for the people that take these appointments, or for the managers in these state entities, if you see a pair in a different entity get sacked over something like this, you know I can't allow this to happen for me either. You know, so
you would be
surprised.
There
needs to be some head ruling.
You might be surprised.
That is true.
I would not be entirely surprised if nobody loses their job or position.
That is true.
But anyway, we have to conclude this morning's conversation there with the time that we have. Karen, thank you very much for joining us once more, for your explanation, for your insight, and for your knowledge, expertise. Well, at least I can say that. We have an expert with us. So thank you very much, Karen, very much for joining us.
Yes, and just by the way, you can go onto the commission site, and I think you would see Mr. Mirage, Senior Counsel's summing up, which I thought was pretty good.
COE2022, that's COE2022.com. Visit the website anytime. Sean Michael Small, once more, thank you very much. Always good to have a conversation.
I mean, in the words of Mr. Budraman, it's a bit of a cliche, but I think what he said, it's a lesson that we need to learn in crisis. You know, what did he try to do? He told his guys, as much as he was trying to get them rescued, and he had to make a tough choice, he told his guys, come all here, we have to go. All are we in this together? Because he knew that at the end of the day, it wasn't him alone that got through it. He did get help at the end. So we now have to band together. With a lot of the issues we have to face, this is just one of them.
I will simply conclude by stating...
And with that, I say, Sean, to you, if you can look at me, Sean, with that I say...
Oh gosh, Karen.
Karen,
inside joke, folks.
Karen, if we only knew that happens multiple times on a daily basis. In fact, it's probably going to happen at least 5 times between now and 10 o'clock. But anyway, Karen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as I always say, today is a good day to have a good day. Make it possible. Make it happen. Yes, you can. You have the power. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.